I'd like to call to order the City of Littleton City Council virtual study session. It's a budget review tonight for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. It is 6 p.m. or 1800. See, all of council is present except for Council Member Driscoll and Council Member Milliman. And we expect Council Member Milliman to join us shortly. All right, Council, we're looking at a review of the budgets that's being proposed to us from the city manager. And I'm just going to turn it right over to the city manager. We're going to have a long night tonight. We do this again tomorrow night, and we are also starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow, and there will be a third night. I don't have that right in front of me. And Mark, if you could just remind us of that date if you get a chance.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council and staff as well. Tonight is the first of 3 nights. Tonight, tomorrow night, and then Thursday, September 24th is the third night. And Tiffany Hooten, our finance director, she'll go into a little bit more detail with her presentation. So she does have a PowerPoint and she'll start that here pretty quick. I did just want to make kind of a few opening remarks here about the 2021 budget. I have certainly in my career, I've been part of several organizations that have struggled through recessions multiple times. And with each one of those, it was a little clearer path, in my view, about what was to be expected in the years to come, to a large extent. And I think in my work here, certainly with the finance staff and the department directors, I would say that this particular budget is in many ways even more difficult than some of my own past experiences with the Great Recession or even the oil shale bust back in the 1980s when I was on the Western Slope. I think what's really difficult here is that our economy across the country is a little bit unpredictable here as we look into 2021. We've had at least one good month, I would say, of pretty decent sales tax returns. But Tiffany Hooten will be sharing with you, and you got a copy here earlier today, another report here for the most recent month. Quite honestly, it was not good news.
Not at all.
And I think what this emphasizes to me personally is that how we approach the 2021 budget, in my view, we need to be very careful, very conservative about how we look to 2021. And I believe that in probably the second quarter of next year, it is my recommendation that we look to an opportunity for perhaps another budget discussion, perhaps a supplemental appropriation discussion, that if the economy does respond in a positive way, then the council could have an opportunity to look at programs and services and make some adjustments. But based on what we know today, I believe we need to be very cautious. In fact, I've been having this conversation with several of my peers in the metro area. I think we're all struggling with the very similar challenge, is trying to understand what to expect in the economy in 2021. And I think it's fair to say that my peers, we all struggle trying to, present our councils with a budget with some level of certainty. I think too that the other thing I would emphasize is that we have, in the beginning of the year, all of us, we know that we had great aspirations here, great expectations for our city, for our community. The council had a pretty ambitious work plan, a set of goals, and I believe all of us were pretty excited about that opportunity. Now with COVID-19, we've obviously had to take a step back and we've had to reassess kind of what are the real priorities. And I think that's our challenge here over the next 3 days and probably in the months to come, is to make sure that all of us, the council specifically, that we're all understanding what are the real priorities and commitments that this organization is going to make in the balance of the year and certainly into 2021. One of the tools that we've used here in the last few years, certainly since I've been here, is that we've gone through great extent here to align a work plan with the council goals and with that budget. And so we've done our best. We've certainly had to make some reductions. And this is a very difficult budget process that we're going to be talking through in the next 3 days, but we do have some challenges. We've had to make some reductions. And so as the council kind of reviews all this And if they are looking to some possible adjustments, staff is here to help kind of shape that view, that conversation, and to assist you in ultimately trying to match up this budget 2021 to achieve your goals. So with that, I think what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to turn this over now to Tiffany Hooten, and she's going to start us off. And by the way, you know, this is a study session format. Being in the virtual world here makes it a little bit more awkward, but truly we have an opportunity to kind of engage in conversation about several topics. If we are able to make some decisions in a relatively short period of time, great. That's historically what we've done. We also have a kind of a parking lot. So if we have some issues that we've identified that may take some more conversation, certainly tonight and tomorrow, the parking lot is really part of the third day for which we can come back. Staff can do perhaps some more research, and then hopefully the council will be in a better position to perhaps make some decisions. All right. So Mayor, if you're okay, then I think I may just turn this over to Tiffany Hooten, our Finance Director.
And I'm going to just remind council, if you will, please raise the hand icon, and I'll keep an eye on that. And then as questions come up, we'll interrupt as we can. And by the way, that third date is the 24th of September, and it's also a 6 o'clock meeting.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Good evening, Council and Mayor Pro Tem. This evening is the first evening of our 3 nights of budget sessions for the 2021 budget. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, and so as I mentioned, this is the 2021 budget presentation, and each year we try to have some sort of theme or progression, and this year we have chosen stay the course, and I think that is very relative in our economic situation right now and our budget situation. You know, Mark alluded to a number of aspirations that we had related to council goals and in the community goals, and I think in the light of COVID, you know, we want to continue to stay the course on some of those goals. Just real quickly, we do have a schedule before you. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a budget overview. So we're going to spend a little time talking about the 2020 budget, how we're going to end this year, or how we envision we're going to end this year. And then we're going to move on to the 2021 budget and kind of give you some highlights of what direction we're headed in. I have Stacy Covington here with us. She's the budget analyst, and she's going to talk to you about priority-based budgeting and how we used that significantly this year in making some of our decisions in the 2021 budget. We're also going to go over a few policy questions and some budget highlights with each department. And then we're going to move on to some general fund discussion. We're going to go through a few departments this evening, and then we're going to carry on into tomorrow, Wednesday, and kind of finish up the general fund. And then we're going to talk about the capital projects fund. On Thursday, September 24th, we're going to move to the enterprise funds, talk about the sewer and storm drainage fund, and then we're going to kind of touch on some of our other smaller funds that we have here at the city. We'll leave some time for parking lot items, and then we'll have a few closing remarks on that third night. So I think, as in past years, a 2021 budget, you know, we had a very specific plan and method that we're going to use for the 2021 budget. We had started on that path. We were updating PBB. We were aligning it with the Envision Littleton goals and the city and the council goals. And then we had to address some specific areas related to COVID. You know, we still wanted to make sure that we met some goals, that we're meeting some demands in the community. We're being collaborative with all of the other departments. And we're still trying to be innovative. I think if one thing that COVID has proven to us is that now is really the time that we need to look forward and be innovative. We also scrutinized all the budgets across all departments, all funds, and then we want to make sure that we're meeting the demands and expectations as well. You know, I just wanted to kind of remind you of our leadership framework. PBB is certainly a piece of this, along with individual goals. measuring, reviewing, and analyzing and process improvement. So I think for the proposed 2021 budget, one of the things that we had to look at was, where do we think we're going to be in 2021? COVID has really caused some concern and uncertainty related to next year and even years after that. So we were relatively conservative in this budget in 2021 with our revenues. We're hoping that we're going to be back to where we were in the 2020 adopted budget. And so we're hoping that we're going to see about a $4.1 million increase or 9% in 2021. And that's compared to our year-end estimate this year. As far as expenditures, we do have a total reduction of about $1.9 million from our 2020 budget. And again, this is just in light of the COVID situation and making sure that we're being conservative as we move forward. Of that 1.9 million, about 450,000 of that is related to personnel reductions. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. And then 1.4 million is roughly related to operating and capital. I think one thing that we've been talking about the past few years is our investment in infrastructure. If you recall, our capital projects fund has been struggling for a number of years. We are well aware that we need an additional funding source, and COVID only added to that. It further constrained our revenue source in our expenditure needs, and it's caused additional reductions in the future related to fleet replacements, IT, and building maintenance. And again, this is just deferring some of our operating and capital needs further down the road. So on 2020, COVID hit very quickly, and the city had to make some abrupt decisions and some abrupt changes. And, we've been monitoring the revenues since the middle of March. Retail, sales tax, general use, and motor vehicle are our largest source of revenue. They're about 78% of our revenues. So when we see a decrease in those three sources of revenues, we have to react. So through August, and I did share the August sales and use tax report this morning, we are actually down on retail sales tax 4% over the year. It's about $873,000. General use is quite a bit more. We're down about $522,000 or 36%. And motor vehicle is down about $243,000 or 14%. The only one that we've really seen kind of a comeback is on motor vehicle sales tax. So if you look overall on these through revenues through 2020 through August, we have a total reduction of $1.6 million or 7%. Now, as far as the other revenues, we have intergovernmental revenues, we have court fines and forfeitures. And as far as those revenues are concerned through July, we have a total loss of about $482,000 or 8%. So I think all in all, in 2020, we still are estimating that we're going to have a reduction of about $4.1 million for 2020. I think one thing, that we continue to see is there are some specific industries that have actually weathered this pretty strongly. When you think of grocery stores, people are still purchasing groceries. They're still needing those goods at the grocery stores. And so we've kind of seen an uptick in the grocery stores. And then we've also seen, some of our home improvement stores here in Littleton. We have a couple of larger stores. We have Lowe's and Home Depot, and we've actually seen a pretty good uptick. As far as the other areas, retail has suffered significantly, as has restaurants. Also, the use of gas or gas taxes has seen a reduction.
Tiffany, are you advancing the slides?
No, I'm not. I'm just talking.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Just adding a little commentary here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, with less people driving, we've seen a reduction in our highway user tax fund. That's the gas tax. And so COVID has really impacted the revenues in a number of areas. We had the courts closed for a while, so we weren't able to hold court, and we weren't able to collect fines. And, also the library and museum, just having those services closed during COVID has certainly impacted the city's revenues. I mentioned earlier that we had to be responsive and we had to be quick in what we were doing and strategic as far as expenditures or reducing expenditures. So when we saw early on that we were definitely going to have a reduction in revenues, we had to react. And some of the things that we did early on is we actually did a reduction of our 2020 budget of about $2.1 million. This was across all departments. I don't know that there was one department that wasn't impacted in one way or another. Some of the things that we did, we had some plans that we had envisioned getting done in 2020, some professional consulting services, and we put a hold on those. And we understand, some of those things might be pushed out a couple of years, but it was important to us to acknowledge and make adjustments early on in the year. Learning and education is another one. We did across the board reductions and asked departments, what can you reduce? How can we curb this loss of revenue that we're going to have in 2020? We made some changes in our temporary and seasonal employees. If we're not going to be able to provide some of those services, then we had to make adjustments to the employees in those areas. The one thing we did this year is we eliminated market increases for 2020. The other thing is we suspended the 457 pension match. We had furloughs, with the library and the museum and some other services. We were just unable to provide those due to COVID-19 and social distancing efforts. And so we did put employees on furloughs. And then we did some freezes on seasonal and vacant positions. And this was just not knowing where we're going to be in 2020 or even into 2021. So we made some we were very aware of some of the positions that we did not fill in 2020. The one thing that we did also look at was the early retirement incentive program. And you'll see we had a number of employees who took advantage of that and were able to retire earlier, which also allowed the city to realize some significant savings going forward on some of those positions. And then also we did have a few layoffs that we had to go through this year just in light of COVID and all of those efforts. So for personnel changes, I mentioned the early retirement incentive program. We had 18 employees who took advantage of this program, which is equivalent to about 15.73 FTEs. And, we knew early on that there was a possibility that some of those employees or positions would need to be added back to the budget. And it was just merely based on service levels or needs throughout the city or the organization. So we did add back 8.5 FTEs related to the ERI. I think overall, the net reduction that the city is going to realize on providing this program is about $600,000. So that's a savings that we're going to realize in 2021 and moving forward. Now, there could be a chance that the economic situation improves significantly over the next few years, and there could be some ask from departments to add some of those back, or maybe even some other reclass positions. But as of right now, we are realizing about a $600,000 reduction. I think some of the departments that have been impacted by the early retirement are across the board. We have the city manager, city attorney's office, economic development, the omnibus program. The police department had some early retirement, public works, the grounds division. We had some in code enforcement, and then also quite a few in the library and museum area. And I think, Stacy's going to talk a little bit about it during priority-based budgeting, but, HR and finance really did work together to work with departments to really understand what their service needs were, to get an idea of, are there any reorganizations that we can do in the city or in your department? Are there sharing possibilities that we have amongst departments? And so we were able to kind of mitigate, so we didn't have to hire back all of the employees that retired, but there are some significant changes throughout the organization. And again, I mentioned the layoffs. And then reorganization efforts, that gave us the opportunity to really look internally and see, where do we need to shift things? What changes might we need to make? So, for 2020, we're just going to continue to monitor our sales and use tax revenue specifically. 78% of our revenues come from those sources. A large decrease in that could significantly impact future services that are provided, and then also monitoring our other revenues. I think one thing that we have on deck, if you will, is we have a number of other areas within the city that we could look to if we do have to make additional reductions going further. We've worked with the departments. We have some things that we can still mitigate and make changes if we do need to. We're hoping, like probably every other jurisdiction in Colorado and the United States, is we're hoping that this will rebound, that we'll be able to come back quickly. That's what we're hearing out there. And, we need to make sure that we're watching that and monitoring those revenues, because if there is another significant decrease, then we will be making some different decisions going forward. As far as the future, COVID-19 definitely pushed us into a recession. We were well overdue for a recession, and it was going to come at any time anyway. I think COVID just really pushed us there. Our economy is very unstable right now. As soon as the businesses are able to open up, are they going to open up 100%? And it might be their decision. And so we've got to be aware of that and understand, how businesses might react. Even if the federal government or the state allows us to open, businesses still have that ability to hold back if they want to. We really reduced our revenues in the future years. Our 5-year average increase is now only 2.1%. In 2021, we're talking a flat increase on sales and use tax, just completely flat, just because we just don't know where we're going to be in 2021. This is significantly less than we've looked at in the past. Our mill levy is still remaining at 2.0 mills, and we are still meeting our obligation of transferring $3.1 million from the general fund to the capital projects fund. And then again, looking for additional revenue sources going forward. We've talked about a potential sales tax increase or some other sort of revenue source to the city. And so that really is a topic of discussion. So for the general fund, just a quick overview. In 2021, we estimate that we're going to be at about $9.9 million or $10 million. Revenues are $45.6 million, and our expenditures are roughly $46.2 million. I mentioned 78%, 87% of that is from our retail sales tax, 6% from general use, and 7% from motor vehicle and others. Franchise fees are now our second largest source of revenue at 5%, and property taxes have dropped down to our third highest revenue at 4%, just based on the reduction of the mill levy. The one thing about property taxes, based on some of the state statutes that have changed in light of COVID, we typically get estimates from the county at the end of August on what our sales tax might look like next year. That has been delayed to October 13th. For our budgeting purposes, I did include a 2% increase, but we won't know what that number might look like until at the earliest October 13th, with the final in December. And then again, our other revenues are about 13%. On the expenditure side, again, we're a service provider, so the majority of our expenditures are from personnel costs at 69%. Operating and maintenance is at 24%, and capital and non-operating is about 7%. One thing that we are required to do is manage our 5-year fund balance, our 5-year projections, and what our ending fund balance is as a percentage of our operating expenditures. You have a copy of this in your budget book, and this is our revised 5-year financial projections. You will see in 2020 we had about a $4 million decrease in revenues just based on where we're looking for this year. And then we actually reduced our estimates and our revenues in the out years as well as a result of that. The one thing is we were able to maintain our fund balance policy and our 5-year plan. Between 8 and 18% is where we want that to be in that 5th year, and we're at about 9%, just based on our estimates today. I'll caution you, as I always do with projections, they are only as good as the moment that you print them. Anything can change at any moment. Revenues might go down, they might go up. Same with expenditures. We might have some unexpected expenditure that we have to address. So I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and move to some discussion on priority-based budgeting. I'm going to hand it over to Stacy, and she's going to kind of highlight how we've used PBB in 2020 in preparation of our 2021 budget, and kind of talk specifically on some program highlights and some programs that were reviewed.
Tiffany, may I just interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
Mayor and Council, I might suggest that we just pause here a moment. I know Tiffany's gone through quite a bit of information here, and I would like to see if the Council has any questions about our forecasting and specifically the revenues that we're looking at here for 2021 and beyond before we go too much further. Would that be a fair question to ask at this point?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I do have one question to start it off on questions. With all the COVID or the CARES Act funds coming in, how was that considered?
So the CARES Act, anything that's going to be funded by CARES Act, we're actually paying for it out of our grants fund. One of the requirements of use of CARES Act fund is that it's not in your current budget. And so anything that we have requested or are going to use CARES Act monies for is not in our budget. So you're not going to see anything in the general fund related to CARES Act. It's going to be completely isolated in a grants fund.
And it's offset as far as expenses and whatever other revenue categories?
Yes. Any expenditures will be requested as a reimbursement from Arapahoe and Jefferson County for those COVID-19 related expenditures.
Right. Councilmember Elrod.
Tiffany, in one of your slides, you showed a revenue number of 45 million and an expenditure number of 46 million. So can you go back to that 46 million? Because when I look at the budget book, we're looking at total expenditures of 43. Did I misunderstand something? Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So if you look in the budget book, if you're looking at the fund summary page, which is on page 47, there is that the one?
It is.
Yeah. If you look kind of below the expenditures, there's an other financing sources and uses, and it has that 3.1 million transfer or 3.2 total in 2021. So that's an expenditure that you would add to that 43 number to get the 46.
All right, got you now. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, we don't have any other questions. Let's move on.
All right, good evening. As Tiffany stated, my name is Stacy Covington, and I am the budget analyst with the City of Littleton. So I went over quite a bit of the PBB process for 2020 in an earlier study session, so I'll try not to be too redundant. But to recap a little bit, we went into 2020 with three major goals for the continued implementation of PBB, and that was to complete annual system updates, complete an annual program review, and then to further integrate PBB with the normal budget request process. So the annual system updates take place during the first quarter of the year, and they consist of updating the program list, allocating the current year budget to the PBB programs, and updating the program scores. The scoring piece was especially notable this year because the community results were updated to reflect Envision Littleton comprehensive and transportation master plans. And that meant that all of the community programs, new and old, were completely rescored for community results. We also made progress in refining programs to be more consistent and comparable with one another, and increase the amount of cross-departmental costing as we move forward towards focusing more on programs and less on individual departments. Because this took place early in the year, this process was largely unaffected by COVID-19. After the system updates were completed, we could then move on to the program review. Although staff are now expected to take into consideration PBB implications for any budget decisions, the program review typically provides the opportunity to do a deeper dive analysis of a sampling of programs, and then we're able to build up our PBB muscles, if you will, by being immersed in the concepts. The program review is based on a tool called the PBB Blueprint provided by our consultants Resource X, and focuses on identifying what the blueprint calls opportunities. And those consist of adjusting or maintaining service levels, creating or eliminating programs, finding efficiencies, utilizing outsourcing or partnerships, and generating new revenue. Unlike the system updates, though, the program review plans were very much impacted by COVID-19 due to the timing and how much it changed our budget needs and priorities. However, it did showcase how flexible PBB can be in a variety of circumstances, and we were very fortunate to already have the PBB data available for decision making. But as a result of the reduced time frame and the need to reduce costs in our budget overall, the PBB program review was adjusted to be a broader review of program opportunities with a focus on identifying opportunities to reduce service level, to free up resources so that we're able to maintain our most critical services. Through this modified program review, we were able to achieve our third goal of further integrating PBB into our normal budget request process. As staff identified program opportunities that impacted the budget, they were asked to complete a PBB business case form to support their changes, and those were submitted along with their proposed budget requests. In addition, HR had devised the early retirement incentive program as a cost savings tool. And during the budget process, HR and finance teamed up to work with department directors to determine the service level impact of ERI participants, and if it was possible to reduce service levels with the retirement, or if the position needed to be refilled. And those positions, which resulted in service level reductions, were a large part of the PBB program outcomes. On page 29 of your proposed budget, you can see a summary of the potential opportunities that were identified as a result of the program reviews. In all, there were 34 potential opportunities identified, most of which were service level reductions. But there were also opportunities identified for increasing and maintaining service levels, eliminating programs, realizing efficiencies, and taking advantage of outsourcing and partnerships. The budget impact is estimated to be a net savings of about $741,000 from these review outcomes, with potentially more saving opportunities depending on the outcomes evaluations that are still underway or that are planned for later on, either later this year or in 2021. And the outcomes, which reflect evaluations that are ongoing, are shown as TBD on the summary. And then following the summary pages in the proposed budget document are 15 program highlight pages, and we introduced those to the budget document last year. And each of these pages highlights a single program in PBB that was part of the review process. On the highlights page, you can find a description of the program, the changes or evaluations that are recommended for 2021, the service levels proposed, envision Littleton connections, and data that is commonly used for analysis in priority-based budgeting, including FTE allocation, the distribution of personnel versus non-personnel costs, and the quartile ranking. In addition, the program budget is included on the program highlights, and I wanted to touch on that specifically because it can be a little confusing. When you look at the program budget, it truly is just for that program. However, when opportunities are implemented, they very often impact more than one program. So for example, when you look at the purchasing program highlight, you will see a personnel cost increase for the reclassified positions. However, what you don't see on that highlight are the percentages of those positions that are allocated to other programs, or the personnel cost reduction in city clerk and the community development programs, which were part of the position reclassification. And thus, when you look at the summary and you look at the related program highlights, it very rarely matches up exactly. So I believe the plan is for directors to go into more detail about the outcomes as they speak individually, but at this time, we would be happy to answer any questions about the process.
I don't see any questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go ahead and move forward.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you an overview of the policy questions. I believe in 2020, we had, I want to say there were 27 I can't remember exactly, 27 or 28 policy questions. We typically have anywhere between 20 and 30. Policy questions are usually something that a department has requested, whether it be a new program, a new contract that they want to enter into for a professional consulting service, an FTE, something similar to that. With COVID, it's pretty clear that there wasn't a lot of room for departments to add to the budget. Of course, there are certainly some things that we need to address and we need to move forward with. So just real quickly, I'm going to go over the 9 policy questions that we have this year. But I am going to wait and we'll really touch on these specifically when we go through the departments. And I'll kind of do a highlight of each department at the beginning, and I'll remind all of us what the policy question was for that department if they had one. And so I can go ahead and go forward with that.
If you can hang on 1 second, we have a couple questions. First, we'll go to Mark and then Karina.
Sure.
Tiffany, you just might remind council what is a policy question and how we use that in the budget process. For some, that may be a new term, but would you mind reviewing that quickly?
Sure, yeah. As I kind of touched on, a policy question is something that a department might request during the year, or for the next year, they might want to add a new FTE to address a service delivery issue or concern. There might be some sort of professional and consulting plan or that they want to add to the budget next year. Maybe it's a one-time thing. It also could be a new program, next year, and probably in 2022, in 2023, you're going to probably see a policy question related to cameras for the police department, the body-worn cameras, in response to the state requirements. So it's just something that we might want to add or highlight to council, and then give council the opportunity to make comments or ask any questions or make any changes, or you can support or maybe add a budget proviso to that. Does that help, Mark?
It does. And a budget proviso, you might explain that term.
Sure, all these new terms. So budget proviso is kind of new to the city. What it is we might want to ask council to support a program or the implementation of a program, but we want to make sure that council's comfortable with that. We want to make sure that we provide you enough data. We might not have it today, but it might be something that we want to bring forward to council. And so we might ask you to go ahead and put that budget amount in the budget for 2021, but we want a budget proviso. So we want to be able to come back to you and say, provide you with more information to get your support at that time. So it's kind of a placeholder. We'll put the money in the budget, but we're going to wait for council's approval to move forward on it, depending on what type of policy question it is. And we do have 4 of those this evening. So of the 9 policy questions that we have before you, 4 of them actually, we're already suggesting that we have a budget proviso on that.
Karina.
Thank you. I jumped a little too quick before I could find my raised hand. Going back to the priority-based budgeting and how it was used. So all of the ones that were shared here in our packet, regardless of what their quartile alignment was, because I do see some that were at least aligned. The question I have is, these are all included in the proposed 2021 budget. Therefore, they have been approved and accepted and recommended essentially from staff, correct?
They've been proposed, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And they're included in the 43 million expenditure number.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And were there a series of programs that were presented internally within staff and not approved?
There were, and you're going to see a couple of those with the budget provisos. You're going to see the shopping cart. You're going to see the omnibus. Those in particular are ones that either are not in the current budget or have a budget proviso. There's also...
It's on that schedule that says eliminate program.
Yes.
Okay. And then the only other observation, it truly is an observation here on what I really appreciated was the schedule where you ticked off what, whether it was increased service level, decreased service level. So that was very helpful. Thank you for that. I was really hoping to see more in the increased efficiency bucket because we are decreasing service levels across 12 programs. So that we will really feel that. Our community will really feel that. So I was hoping that we would find, I'm looking for more programs that can increase our efficiency. I don't know that that's something we can, I know it's not something we can address right now, but please take that back as, I guess, a comment and maybe an evaluation.
Okay, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no more questions.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the policy questions. As I mentioned, we have 9. I'm just going to touch on these quickly, and as I mentioned, the departments are going to kind of highlight these, and we'll talk more in depth when we get to the department discussions. But I just want to kind of give you an overview of what those are going to be. So the first one that we have is related to Envision Littleton, and it's, does council wish to fund post-comprehensive plan strategic initiatives under a budget proviso? This is very similar to one that we had last year. We asked for $100,000 or $300,000, I believe it was, related to maybe the downtown plans, some River Point, or I can't remember what we called the north part of Littleton right now, but just some downtown plans and strategic plans that council might be interested in. But we didn't really have a idea of what that might cost or what specific area. And so we did a budget proviso. So this is very similar to that in 2021. The second policy question is, does council support revising city codes, starting with the development codes, to align them with the comprehensive and transportation master plans and ultimately create a unified land use code? Again, this is following on the Envision Littleton, the comprehensive plan, and the TMP plan process. And this is going to allow us to actually update and create a unified land use code. We have a couple under financial sustainability. Policy question 3 is, if council wishes to pursue one or more ballot questions in 2021, does council support funding for public opinion polling or public education related to these ballot questions? The fourth one that we have this year is related to storm drainage. If you recall, last year, staff presented a 3-year rate increase related to storm drainage. This would be the 2nd year rate increase. It's an increase of $19.09 annually. And again, does council support this increase for a single family home and a corresponding percentage for the other classes? We'll come back to that one when we talk about storm drainage on the 24th. The 5th one that we have is related to Omnibus. This question again is under financial sustainability. And does council support funding the Omnibus program under a budget proviso in 2021? And again, this is one of the questions that staff is proposing a budget proviso. And we will be talking about that in detail when we get to Administrative Services Department. We have a few under good governance. Policy question number 6 is related to employee benefits and compensation. And does council support a $1 million increase for employee compensation and benefits for 2021? This is a policy question that we have every year. It's directly related to compensation and market and health insurance and dental and other insurances afforded to employees. And we will talk about that when we get to the HR department. Policy question number 7, this is related to local partnership program. Each year, council authorizes a lump sum of money to provide it to nonprofit and local organizations through an application process. Usually this is well underway and we're able to provide information to council to make those decisions. Unfortunately, due to COVID, there's a delay in this, and we will talk a little bit more about that with the city manager's office. Policy question 8 and 9 are both related to our parks and recreation areas within Littleton. Typically, we join forces with South Suburban, and they're able to provide us with a capital plan over the next 5 years. And we're able to include projects, maybe they changed from the previous plan, maybe they added one or moved one around to a different year. Based on COVID and some of the impacts that South Suburban has realized with that, they are not requesting at this time. They haven't defined what projects they're going to be working on. And we want to go ahead and include projects that were intended and in the current plan in this budget. So you're going to see about 1.7 million in total with the city of Littleton's portion being 490,000. You're going to see that in this budget. But again, this will be under a budget proviso because South Suburban and Parks and Rec is going to be updating their capital plan later this year or early into next year. And policy 9 is also related to that. The city contracts with South Suburban to provide services to South Platte Park. And again, this is just for capital. It's a placeholder with a budget proviso. We wouldn't move forward with it until we come back to council with a planned use for that. So I think with that, I'm going to hold right now, and I'm going to save some of these others for tomorrow evening and the 24th. And what I would like to do now is I would like to give the departments and the directors an opportunity to speak to you on some of their department efforts that they've made and maybe some of the reductions that they've seen as a result of COVID. And we do have a schedule, and I can't look at a clock and look at the schedule at the same time. So I think we're okay on time. Someone want to let me know if we're okay on time here?
Doing
Good on time.
Oh, we're really good. Okay. All right. Perfect.
Your budget highlights you had till 7 o'clock.
Oh, good. We're a few minutes early then. Perfect. No one minds ending early potentially. So I think I'm going to go ahead and jump into some highlights for some of our departments. I'm going to talk about city council, city manager, and city attorney kind of all in one envelope here. I have a few things I just want to share on each department before I kind of relinquish the reins to them. I'm going to start with city attorney because it's listed last, and I don't want Reed to think he always has to go last in a group. So I'm going to go ahead and start with him. So policy questions, we didn't have any related to the city attorney's office this year, but I do want to kind of touch on some budget highlights and some other specific things related to his budget. Thank you. So for 2020, we mentioned the early retirement incentive program, and city attorney and city manager were impacted by employees retiring and taking advantage of that. And so there was an evaluation and a reorganization looked at citywide and kind of impacted both of these departments. And so you're going to see a request in the city attorney's office. There was one FTE that was being shared between the city manager and the city attorney's office. And just based on the workload and the need in those two departments going forward, it definitely was evident that we needed to have two FTEs in that role to service each department individually. And so there is an increase, an ask of a 0.5 FTE in the city attorney's office and a 0.5 FTE in the city manager's office to make both of those positions a full-time position. The other thing that we are doing internally this year in the city attorney's office is we made some changes with the prosecutor and increased the number of hours that that position is servicing. And so we added a 0.2 FTE. The good thing about this is that Reed was able to look internally at some of his other line items and make reductions and make some permanent reductions going forward to help offset this slight increase related to that 0.2 FTE. And then a couple of other items that I think are notable for the city attorney's office is the contract attorney services. In the past, we've had a pretty healthy line item in case there's some sort of case or need for Reed to reach out to another outside attorney for an opinion or some help in some certain areas. And I think, Reed looking internally and having Ashley on his team, that, you know, he's really able to reduce that contract attorney amount that he's had in the past, and he virtually eliminated it. I think there's about $1,000 left in that line item. So he's really taking on in-house as much as he can to save that for the city. And then he also made some pretty significant reductions related to legal service that is contracted or managed on a monthly basis. And so those are just a few things that I kind of wanted to highlight for the city attorney's office. And Reed, if you have anything you want to add, or I'm sure someone might have some questions for you.
Not a lot to add. Thank you, Tiffany, for kind of the summation. You know, I would say, yeah, Tiffany is correct in the sense that we're having to add, I guess, some FTEs, if you will. I did my best to try to make sure that there wasn't an impact going forward to our budget, and I think I was able to kind of shift a lot of things around internally to make it work without there being kind of a noticeable increase going forward from the budget from 2020 to the budget from 2021. So we all recognize that all departments are going to be affected by the COVID situation and the reductions in revenue. So I tried to be as thoughtful as I could with understanding that I still need to be able to provide a continuing level of service. So that's all I have. And I'm sure Tiffany is able to answer questions on my behalf should council have any.
Great. I do have one opening question here. So, Reed, it looks like you're basically eliminating the contract services by, well, to 50,000, which is quite a reduction. But overall, you're increasing only by the 7,000, I think it is. Yeah, about 7,000,
Right.
which is nearly 40,000 from what we proposed last year. So the bulk of it is going to be contract services.
Correct. Yeah, the contract attorney position, I would say by and large, given some of the changes the city attorney's office has had seemingly over the years, it's been a little bit difficult to get a good feel on what the recommended need was for that line item. I would say with my broad area of expertise, if you will, in municipal law, and bringing in Ashley and even Tracy Schroeder, our new prosecutor, I feel really comfortable with being able to manage some of the things that perhaps in the past we used to go outside, but I feel pretty comfortable managing that internally.
And with Becky, Becky you shared Becky? Could you go into that a little bit for council?
Yeah, originally Becky Fye was the city attorney paralegal, and several years ago, that position was split between the city manager and the city attorney's office. So essentially half of her 50% of that position's pay was paid for by the city manager and 50% by the city attorney's office. Going forward, given the deputy city manager's decision to take advantage of the early retirement and Mark's decision not to fill that, I think, in Sama, to be honest, her expanding role within that organization, I'll let Mark speak to it, but they believe that they needed, correctly so, a full-time person to manage the internal administration of the city manager's office. So that necessitated the city attorney's office needing to go out and find my own paralegal. I have enough to do, so without trying to do Becky's work, it's borderline malpractice for me not to have a paralegal in my office. So that's just something that needs to be filled.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think Reed did a pretty good job there of kind of summarizing some of the discussion that both he and I have had with the city attorney's office and the city manager's office. Just to add, make sure it's clear. The early retirement program, we lost the deputy city manager as well as the Becky Fye as the executive assistant. And so we brought back on Lucy Lucero basically to fill in as the administrative function and to take some of the burden that I've now asked Sama Fox to take on and shift a little bit of the responsibilities and have Lucy do more of that work. But in exchange, we also recognize that Reed needs the assistance here in the city attorney's office. And council, I know you understand this, but our workload is pretty heavy. And I think the city attorney's office, they just really need the paralegal in this particular case.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Council, any other questions? All right. We're looking good. We're looking real good.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move over to City Council. So really the only question, policy question that we have related to the City Council's budget is funding of the local partnership. Funding of the local partnership funding program. It's hard to say. And if so, at what level? In the past, last year, that budgeted line item was $86,500. We did reduce that to $65,000 in 2021. And so we're asking support from council as to whether you do support continuing to fund that at that amount. I think I mentioned earlier that typically we have applications already submitted and reviewed and presented to council during these budget sessions, but just based on COVID and the limitations there, we did postpone that. And what staff is asking is if council supports moving forward with the program and at that $65,000 funding amount, then we would look at the program and opening up some sort of application process over the next few months, and then coming back to council and providing some information on the organizations that applied. And I know Sama is here to kind of talk about what that might look like if you have any specific questions.
I think Karina has a question at this moment.
Thank you. So this is something that, I've been challenging year over year, and the amount has been going down year over year. And the challenge that I've always presented is, help me to align this to what our council goals are and what our strategy is. And it pretty much has consistently been, for the most part, it's, organizations we've contributed to in the past. So we will continue to. And given that there's so much uncertainty, and given that it's truly only 65,000, I actually do not support this. I think this is time to really revisit this strategy and this approach. I think we will, as we have seen even this year, there will be impacts from COVID next year and beyond. I'd rather take the position of, if there is a request that comes in from a specific organization because of a specific need, that we take that on as a council and determine how it may align to the different goals that we may have or programs that we're trying to support, from mental health to anything else for that matter. So I am recommending, or my position is that I do not support this particular policy question.
Any other council questions? Kelly.
Tiffany, can you just name a couple of examples of local partnership funding that we've done in the past?
I can field that if you'd like, Tiff.
Sure, great.
So some of the larger donations or grants we've made in the past were All Health Network, Doctors Care, TLC Meals on Wheels, Integrated Family Services. In the past, this is also how our in-kind would come through. So if we were going to support an event like Western Welcome Week, they would send a request here.
Great. And for newer council members, and I know the other council members know this, was one of the last things we do on the budgets typically, is nonprofits that come in and request for money. That is the category, is it not, Tiffany?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you. Any other questions? I think, Scott, I thought I saw your hand up. Nope, it went down. Councilmember Fay.
have managed to miss the point of what we are talking about changing. So Tiffany, are we talking about reducing the amount of money that goes to nonprofits? Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Fay, I think it's a couple of things. One, I think I think ultimately, does council support continuing this program? And then the second question is, are you comfortable with the 65,000 amount that staff has proposed for that program?
To continue, I am not comfortable with the way we've been doing this. We have been, our philosophy in writing has been, now maybe it's changed recently, has been to continue funding those that we have funded. And I really wonder about the wisdom of that. We don't have a method of following up to see what was done with the money. There's no accountability in it at all. So, Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question to Councilmember Elrod?
Sure.
Are you proposing that we don't give funding across the board like we have, but rather have them apply individually when they need?
I don't know that I have a formal proposal, but I, to answer the question being asked here by Tiffany is, do we support the current program as it exists? I would say no. I would be open to ad hoc requests that may come in throughout the year as a result to show need or maybe in alignment with the program that we're trying to take forward. So I don't have a formal recommendation of how it should be done, but I am open to requests coming in some form, but not under the current program. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have one more question, but sure. I'm really going to wait.
Go ahead. If you have one more, go ahead.
Okay, then Tiffany, if we were not in favor of continuing this at a reduced funding level, would that mean we would do away with this segment of the budget?
That would probably, if there's a majority, then that would give us direction on this policy question.
To do what?
Depending on what the majority is, either continue or not. I've heard 2 no's.
Okay, so if we choose not to continue, that means that this program goes away?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I finally got there. I appreciate it.
All right, cool. Mayor Pro Tem.
Tiffany, what can you say about the relationship between this $65,000 and council being a conduit for nonprofit money through the CARES Act?
COVID has kind of changed this year because we are providing funding to some of the nonprofits. I think one of the differences might be with CARES Act money, it's for a specific purpose. It's related directly to COVID, potential lost revenues for those nonprofits, addressing some of the PPE issues, improvements, things like that. So I think the purpose is different with CARES than what the purpose of use might be under this program.
Many of the recipients have been the same organizations though, right?
Correct. There has been some history of some of the same organizations, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Grove.
The question was the same as what Scott was saying, but how is this different? In other words, people have certain impact of COVID, obviously. This is more for operating expenses. I mean, how would this be different? This fund?
Yeah, this fund would be more geared towards some of their just annual revenues that they receive to operate their current businesses the way that they existed before COVID. Yeah, I think with CARES Act, it's a little more specific related to COVID, ideally.
Thank you.
All right. I do have one question then. So prior to last year's budgeting, this isn't a new line item.
It's not a new line item. We did move it from one department to another recently in the last couple of years, but this has been in place for a number of years.
A long time, and the number was as high as almost 100,000 on some years.
Right. I remember it being just north of 100,000 a few years prior.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. I don't see any other questions. Oh, wait, we got Councilmember Elrod.
And to confirm, actually, this year we did not have this program, correct? So we eliminated it this year, correct?
No, actually, this program was part of the 2020 budget, and the monies actually went out in early January. So it was approved for the 2020 budget, and they were processed and sent out in early January this year.
Sorry, I wasn't remembering. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. All righty, take it away, Tiffany.
All right, so, sorry, I'm
City
still
Manager,
not clear on.
Mark has one.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor, and I think Tiffany is about to ask the question. I think the purpose of this budget discussion is to see if we do have a majority or a consensus on some kind of an action around, say, in this case, a budget issue here around local partnership. So what I've heard is two who are really not in favor. So if there's more consideration to be given, we either can put this to the parking lot here on the third night, or at this point, I don't hear a majority. So Mayor, I guess I'm looking for a little more council discussion and direction.
I would like to put it into the parking lot because I think it is an important issue that everybody's going to want to chime in on. So
that'd be fine. I'd be more than happy to do that for the third night.
Okay, cool. All right, Mayor Pro Tem?
I was just going to recommend also that we put it in the parking lot. I think a budget's such a puzzle, and all the pieces need to be considered together. I'd like to do the 9 policy questions all at once, if that's possible with our schedule.
All right.
That's more than fair.
All right. Scott, did you have another question, or was that it? You're good? All right, cool. All right, Tiffany. Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on. One other note for City Council's budget is you're going to see across all departments, there was pretty significant changes to learning and education. So there was quite a bit of decrease of about 13,000 in City Council's learning and education budget. And I think, in consideration of that for 2021, not knowing where COVID is and social distancing, and are there going to be more virtual meetings in the future? Are there going to be travel requirements in 2021? And so I think taking all of that into consideration, you're going to see a number of departments have reductions, just like the City Council, a reduction for learning and education.
And Tiffany, I think the Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
Yeah, I did have one other question on this. Is it possible to carry over some of the 2020 budget into 2021? Just because I imagine that most of our budget for council's learning, et cetera, for this year has gone unutilized or underutilized just because we can't go anywhere because of COVID. Is that, first of all, accurate, and can we carry it over? And so reduce the 2021 line item?
That's probably pretty accurate across all departments. A number of departments, learning and education was reduced in 2020. That was one of the immediate things that we did across the board. I think as far as carrying it over, we don't typically carry over money from one year to the next unless we have either a contract in place or a specific project that's underway and have a purchase order open. So those are really the only ways that we are able to carry over money into the next year. What you could do is, if you don't feel 13,000 or whatever the amount is, 20,000 is enough. That could be a parking lot item that if you want to increase that, we could certainly add that to that list.
Did we use it all for this year, or where's it gone?
So any unused budget in 2020 just goes to fund balance. And so when we prepare our budget for 2020, we have estimates. And so we've kind of worked with the departments in getting to understand, how much are you going to spend of that line item, or how much of that program are you going to spend? And so we've made estimates already. And if you look across the board on learning and education, almost every department has a reduction that's not going to be used this year. And it just carries, it goes back into fund balance for use in the next year in total.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Sure.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, just a comment. I think travel and training for, quite honestly, all departments, and city council is really no exception here, can be very important depending on how we're trying to engage regionally through the state and other opportunities here. I think we certainly could take another look and put it into the parking lot here and confirm this here for council here on the third night. But at a minimum, I think this is one of those things I kind of commented on in the beginning, where if we'd go into the 2021 with an adopted budget, we're just going to have to watch and see how the COVID-19 plays out over time. If the council believes they need more opportunity to be engaged and we need to add to the budget, this line item is so minor that I would certainly support looking at a supplemental appropriation to make sure that council has that opportunity. Again, I believe it is critical for you to be engaged in our community and regionally, certainly in our state.
Well, I'd be in favor of leaving it as is right now. And then when we do the appropriations, supplemental appropriations in the second quarter, that would be a good time to review this item.
I agree.
All right, Tiffany.
All right, moving along, we're going to switch to City Manager's Department. And Mark receives the award for the most PQs this year. I'm going to give him that award. Of the 9, we have 3 that are related to the City Manager's office. And so we're just going to talk about PQ1. And that's the one that's related to comprehensive plan strategic initiatives. And as I mentioned, this is similar to 2020, the 2020 policy question that had a budget proviso as well. And let's see, we have Sama. Do you want to kind of talk about that one? Or I think Kathleen is on too while I find it.
Sure, I can take policy question 1. So this is for post-comprehensive plan strategic initiatives. It's very similar to a policy question we had in the 2020 budget. This one is provisoed. So we put $100,000 there for potential follow-up work or studies in areas such as historic preservation, parking, mobility, or downtown. We would come to council with a proposal before we use this funding and ask you if we could release it and if you're comfortable with the direction we're going.
All right, we have Council Member Elrod and then Grove.
So is it just a proviso because you don't know how we're going to use it as opposed to we will use it?
Correct, just because we haven't identified the specific item we're going to be using it on.
Okay, I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Okay, Council Member Grove.
Is this where the bid or DDA incentive would be? Or is that someplace totally different?
It could be here, but I would suggest that it not be. I think we'll talk about that incentive here probably on the third night. But I would look to this as projects that go beyond a bid or a DDA. That'd be my recommendation anyways.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tiffany.
Okay. All right, policy question number 2. This is related to revising the city codes and starting with the development codes and then aligning them with the comprehensive and TMP plan to create a unified land use code, which I'm sure none of you know what a unified land use code is by now, right? No one's even heard of it. No? Okay. So this request is for $247,000 roughly, and Kathleen and Jennifer are here if you have any questions related to that one.
And before we get started, Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
Is this really optional, right? For us to have a complete unified land use code, don't we need to align the codes with the new zoning and so on that we're doing? I mean, if we don't do that, isn't it just left undone? I mean, isn't it just sort of half a project?
Good question.
So in short, that's exactly right. We're we're already aggressively approaching how we have put together the unified land use code. A best practice is generally speaking 2+ years. So we've already condensed this into 18 months. And as you know, we're, just through that first building block, and we had sort of designed this to kind of step through into next year and then have the full unified land use code for public review in June of 2021. So in short, you're exactly right.
Where just a quick follow-up, where did this number come from? Because all the other policy questions involve really nice round numbers for the most part. So for this one's $247,252.
Yeah. So this is the balance of what is needed to finish the project in 2021. So this is based on the scope that we designed with Candid Keys Collaborative and those remaining pieces. As you know, with the first of those building blocks, especially with downtown, it's been a really super intense process. So this gets us through those final building blocks. So we finish up neighborhood and then business commercial at the first part of next year. We're sort of drafting along the way. So that's where that number comes from, is directly from how we've designed the scope with both the public engagement pieces in anticipated, as well as the work of drafting the code.
So the odd numbers are based on contract agreements we already have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This doesn't seem like a question to me. This seems like a necessity. So I want to explore the other policy questions later on. This one I do support.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, great. All right, back to you, Tiff.
All right. Moving on to policy question 3. This one is related to potential ballot questions in 2021. And does council support funding any polling related to those questions or any public education efforts that might be needed? This does not mean that there's any questions decided or definitely moving forward. It just gives us the opportunity and the funding should we want to move forward with any ballot questions.
All right, we do have a couple questions. We have Mayor Pro Tem, then Elron.
Mark, if council decides to refer a sales tax increase, is the $50,000 enough to give it the best chance of succeeding? Because I know part of this $50,000 is public education. There's a more sort of a marketing effort, and then the sort of political consulting that we had done as a city the last time around. I think it was 2018.
I would say in response to that question that I think it's a good placeholder. I think we'll, let's just play this out, what if, but if by the end of the third night, the council says you have more interest in looking seriously at a sales tax issue, then in the months to come, we would kind of lay out what that could be eventually in the early part of next year, 2021. Then assuming the council say you want to go, then we'd have a pretty hard discussion about exactly what does that look like and why. So one of the questions the council is going to have to wrestle with if you want to pursue a sales tax is why is it necessary? What is the scope of that over what period of time? We'll talk about that quite honestly on the third night, but I think the number's a placeholder and it could be influenced by some of the decisions that you make in subsequent conversations.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Elrod.
Thank you. So it's exactly because of that point, because it's a placeholder and we're still debating or discussing what that ballot question may or may not be. I would like to recommend that this be a budget proviso instead of an actual allocation, so that we can revisit at that time, 1, to determine do we appropriate, and 2, there maybe the numbers changes. So to me, this one seems like it's more of a budget proviso, or it should be, instead of an actual budget commitment.
Actually, I agree with that. So the fact that we didn't maybe flag that as a proviso was probably an oversight on my part. I would highly recommend that, by the way.
Thank you.
Great. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that.
All right, a couple of highlights for the city manager's budget is Mark already kind of talked about Becky Fye taking the early retirement and having to share that position with the city attorney. So there's also going to be an increase in the city manager's office for that 0.5 FTE to bring that to a full-time employee. And then you're going to see quite a large reduction in the professional and consulting line item for the city manager's office. And that's just in response to some of those one-time plans that were done in 2020, the comp plan, the TMP plan. Some of those costs were from this account, if I remember correctly. And so those were one-time events that occurred. And so we reduced that line item because they're not going to occur in 2021 and moving forward. So you're going to see quite a large reduction in that line item. And with that, those are all the highlights and points that we wanted to make for those three departments. So if you have any specific questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and move on and talk about economic development and community development.
All right, I see no questions. Let's go ahead and move on. We're starting to fall behind a little bit.
All right. So in 2020, we did have some internal reorganizations, and there were two departments created. One of them is community services. And so underneath community services, you're going to see economic development and community development. And we'll go ahead and start with economic development. And we have Denise Stevens here who can certainly help, and Kathleen. And for economic development, we don't have any policy questions, but we do have a PBB highlight, and it's related to economic and
Business attraction.
Economic and business attraction. I'm calling it economic attraction. And so one of the things that you're going to see in the economic development department is you're going to see a reduction in some of the software licensing and some of the database subscriptions. And so we just kind of want to reference you to page 31 if you want in your budget book for that budget highlight. But this was a program that was part of PBB, and this is one to Councilmember Elrod's question on efficiencies. We did find some internal efficiencies in the economic development department that allowed us to eliminate some of our database subscriptions that we might have and utilize some of the other ones in a different way. And so that was definitely one of our programs that we looked at during the 2021 budget. And like I said, we have Denise on if she wants to add anything in particular to that program highlight. But we also had a number of other changes to that budget. Professional consulting, if you recall, we had the EPS plan, economic plan that was developed in 2020 that we're working on, and that was about an $80,000 project that was one time. And so we've removed that from the 2021 budget. And so you'll see a pretty large reduction there related to that program. And there's a number of other reductions. I mentioned learning and education already. You're going to see that, and some other smaller ones, office supplies, things of that nature. So I don't know, Denise, if you want to add anything related to the program highlights and how you kind of assessed some of your database subscriptions and your services that you were managing prior.
Sure, Tiffany. The two more expensive databases that we eliminated are Sightseer, which is basically a package to try and justify a particular location to retail site selectors. And the other one is Streetlight, which allowed us to determine where people were traveling from and where they were going to. But we think that we have other programs that at least in the interim, we can utilize to help attract retailers to the area. So I think we're going to be fine. I do think it's worth considering these being resurrected in the future when we know more about the economy. But I think where databases are one of the most expensive parts of our budget, then we really took a hard look at that and eliminated anything that was not absolutely necessary for the coming year.
Do we have any questions related to that?
Not at the moment, we don't.
Okay, well, that one was a quick one. Thanks, Denise. Appreciate that. We're gonna move on to community development. And again, community development does not have a policy question this year, but we do have some policy or some program highlights related to them. Specifically the code enforcement program and some reductions in residential demos. We did have a couple of demolitions in Littleton in this last couple of years, and we did reduce that line item. So we can still have funding if there's one that might come up during the year. Previously we had 2, so we did reduce that by about half. And then also kind of reducing our environmental programs, related to COVID. We're not able to provide as many during the year. And so we did reduce that to 1 in 2020. And I think some other items that are that we want to note is professional consulting. We did reduce that by about 50%. So we went from 150,000 to 75,000. And that's just based on Jennifer and her group looking internally to see, what contracts did we have? Do we need to continue those? Can we reduce those? Do we need to provide that continued service? She has a number of new employees in her department that are able to kind of take some of those services on. So we were able to eliminate 75,000. The other one that we did reduce for 2021 is the Neighborhood Partnership Grant. This is a grant that we provide to local HOAs or neighborhood groups. They can apply to provide a social event locally with their neighborhood, and just based on COVID and social distancing requirements, we did choose to pull back on that program and reduce it to 20,000 or to 40,000. No, I was right, 20,000, sorry. Jennifer's shaking her head. So we reduced it to 20,000 just based on some of the current situation with neighborhood parties and things like that. And then I think I've already mentioned the other 2, the demo and the trash day event. So Jennifer, I don't know if you want to kind of highlight some of those for council and how that might impact service.
Sure. Tiffany, you did a great job explaining what that would mean. I think our biggest one on the neighborhood partnership. So we've had 20,000. We've done that for both large grants and small grants. The large grants, for example, last year, the Elks Lodge used that grant to do a new sign downtown. So we won't have separate large and small grants. So we're going to reduce that from 60,000 to 20,000. So both large grants and small grants will apply for just the 20,000 in funds that we'll have. And then in terms of code enforcement, part of the early retirement, we did lose one of our code enforcement officers. So that is some of the reasoning of us saying that we need to reduce service levels. Also provides a budget savings, but it also was a personnel issue as well. And then to Council Member Elrod's question on efficiencies. So community development has actually realized and will realize even more efficiencies in a lot of the collaboration projects we have going on with IT right now. One of them being our T9 project, which is our online permitting system. So with this system, we are now able to have a homeowner, developer, or contractor apply for and pay for permits online. We're able to receive permit applications as well as plans in the future with kind of our phase 2 adoption of permit efficiencies. We'll actually be able to review them via a program called Bluebeam. We also, in terms of code enforcement, we have our C-Click Fix program that we talked about a few weeks ago. So we have that efficiency going on. And then also we are doing a program called Laserfiche, which will take basically our old archived projects and paperwork. Ashley can tell you how many boxes and boxes we had of this, but we've been able to do a scanning project. And then this information will be available not only to staff and council members, but also our citizens. So when they're looking for historical information on a project or their property, they will be able to do that on their own online. So.
Great. We do have a few questions. We'll start with Council Member Grove.
Sure.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment, and it's maybe a parking lot thing, because this is process, but it seems to me the neighborhood grant program is a very valid program and helps with a lot of things, neighbors connecting. But when you put this against nonprofits and eliminating that program, I would advocate to eliminate a program like this rather than taking money away from nonprofits.
And one of the ideas I had in hearing the nonprofits and then the partnership grants that we have, if there's any way this program can be combined.
Great. Councilmember Elrod and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for all the great work, Jennifer. I do have a comment on the small and large neighborhood grant as well. So I do like that it's moving, you know, in your commentary, you talk about it going more towards the larger grants, because some of those larger grants are for improvements in an area of our city, right? So I think that makes sense. The only question I have on that, though, you know, despite the significant reduction of that non-personnel line from, you know, call it 60,000 in our original 2020 budget to 20,000, which is the grant amount, the personnel, like our internal personnel, still stayed the same. So now it kind of feels off balance that we're spending maybe 17,000, or maybe explain what that personnel cost is, because it's 17,000 for personnel costs and 22,000 now for the grant amount. So it just seems like maybe not enough of a return on the effort of city staff.
So when you're referring to the personnel costs, the ones that I was referring to was our loss in code enforcement personnel.
No,
but what document are you specifically looking at?
So here on the
that one. Okay, hang on one second.
It's on page, doesn't have a page number.
And Stacy, you might need to assist on that, on how the personnel costs were calculated on that.
Sure. I'm sorry, I'm also having a hard time pulling it up. My apologies.
Page 44, page 44.
Thank you.
Yeah, at this time, honestly, the program highlight does not reflect necessarily a change in personnel. We could consider looking at that and seeing if the allocations need to be updated as far as the estimate for 2021 goes. However, you know, certain amounts of that are just going to be fixed costs in terms of administering the program, whatever that might look like. But we could certainly, Jennifer, discuss if we need to update that estimate, and kind of trying to pull it up really quickly. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull up quickly enough specifically what the personnel allocation is. I am trying.
Yeah, we could certainly follow up with you on that one.
Yeah. My system is going very slow.
Because I will I mean, the personnel, I have a feeling it does have to do with the fact, so Ryan is the person who administers this program. He is not going anywhere and was not affected. However, when we did the PBB, we did the allocation of how much of Ryan's time is used for this program. It is not a huge amount of his time.
It's not. It's just the same as it was, you know. So the cost of a staff effort is the same regardless of how many grants we're giving out. And it just maybe the ROI isn't fully there for the staff time that's being allocated, given that we're not able to distribute more and have a greater impact. Something to consider in that, if that allocation is still accurate, or if you foresee that allocation coming down, given that, there's only.
Stacy, you'll take a look at that?
Yes, yeah.
Great. All right, thank you. Pro Mayor, Scott, you had a
I'm
question?
good.
Okay, you're good?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thanks.
Hey, Mark, you okay?
I'm okay as well.
Okay, cool. All right, no other questions. Let's go.
Okay, moving ahead, looks like we're doing good on time. Sorry, I keep asking. I want to make sure that we're good on time. I don't have any other specific items related to community development. Jennifer kind of touched on them. So if we want to go ahead and move forward, we're pretty much ahead of schedule. We can jump into administrative services.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We're doing great on time.
Okay, that means I'm
We
terrible.
made up a lot of time here.
That means I'm terrible at estimating time before we actually do it.
No, you're doing great. I appreciate it.
All right. One of the other reorganization efforts that we made in the city is, I mentioned we created the community services department. We also created the administrative services department as well. And so underneath administrative services, we have HR, human resources, we have finance, we have information technology, and we have a new division that it might be referred to as purchasing. The formal name for that is going to be procurement and contracts. And so we're really excited about this new division, and we will talk a little bit about that. But I'm going to go ahead and jump to HR. And Noelle, I hope you're ready. I know we're ahead of schedule here, so I know you're on it and are certainly ready. One of the largest policy questions that we ask every year of council is related to personnel and benefits. And we have policy question number 5 that is, policy question number, where is it? Sorry, policy question number 6. We're going to jump to that one first. That's related to employee benefits and personnel. And this is a pretty large ask. It's about $1 million. And this is related to market increases that align with our market philosophy that we have in Littleton. It also relates to any changes in our health, dental, long-term, short-term disability, and vision insurances. And then we can talk a little bit about workers' comp and property and liability along with that. So Noelle, do you want to go ahead and kind of highlight policy question number 6 for us?
Yes. All right. I'm not sure. Hopefully you can see me. Thanks. Appreciate being here tonight. I want to talk about this policy question. I think it continues the theme of COVID and how COVID has just gone wonky on us on a few things. The uncertainty, in the labor market, we're seeing volatility as a result of COVID. For government, we're being impacted a little bit differently than the general labor market across the United States. And that's highlighted in the policy question. Overall, this policy question, as Tiffany talked about, is 3 specific areas. One is for police and the negotiations that we'll enter into shortly with the police department. Pay for our employees, which is a 3% increase, and an increase to our health premiums at 4.2%. I think that it's important, if we talk about our health premiums, where we stand on that. We are doing an excellent job as an organization managing our healthcare costs. I think that it can be contributed to things like our proactiveness with our wellness committee, with our wellness initiatives, our ease of access using the clinic, and then also the cost reductions to the employee, free prescriptions, free medical appointments. All of these things help us to identify issues much early on, which is incredibly helpful when it comes to our renewal experience. Nationally, we're seeing 6 to 10% increases. So us being at 4.2% means that we're managing our health fund very, very well, and the experience of our employees and having a healthier workforce, which always is so helpful, and it's great for our employees as well. When we talk about pay increases for our employees, we have in here 3%. What we've seen with COVID is that employers who we compare ourselves to need increases If they did it at the very first of the year in 2020, obviously the increases went out. If their increases were slated to go after COVID in that March area.
Hey, hon, did you turn the heat on?
Yeah. What do you have it set at? What do you have it set at, Jennifer?
Jennifer, is your heat okay? Making sure we don't want anyone cold out there. So anyways, what we've seen is from other employers that if they gave increases this year, initially they were discussing not giving increases next year in 2021. And we're a group who did not, we withheld our increase this year in 2020. So we would like to slate that for 2021 at 3%. What we do know is that the majority of our benchmark agencies did give increases. And since this policy question was written, we actually have more information as people are providing data into the surveys and the information that we collect. And what we're seeing is that our benchmark organizations are also budgeting, so it's not fully approved yet, but budgeting also for increases next year. So to go 2 years as Littleton back to back without increases would be really detrimental to our ability to maintain our market philosophy and our market policy. It would put us behind significantly in the market, which of course is a hindrance to retention, which in this day and age right now is really, really important, especially if as we've reduced our workforce. Our employees who are here are capable and able. They have institutional knowledge, which means they're much more effective and they know our systems and our processes, so their work is much more efficient. As we reallocate some of the work that is outstanding from people leaving through the retirement program or through the layoffs. Retention is always less costly than hiring new employees for a lot of different reasons. And so as we get further away from our market philosophy, each year that compounds and it becomes much more costly to catch up and become market competitive again. So we're asking for a conservative approach of 3%. In future years, you'll hear us talk about a strategy of catching up to the market. Next year's not necessarily the year to do that, but moving forward with the 3%, I think is a conservative but really appropriate strategy that could have cost savings for us in the future. Tiffany, did I cover all that you'd want me to cover on this policy question before any questions? We open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think so. I think after questions, I'll kind of touch on the property and liability and the workers' comp side.
Great.
I do have a question for you, Noelle. Thank you very much. On our health center that we have over at the Buck Center, with employees not coming in to the office, how is that being utilized now? And is the Buck Center even open for that?
Yeah, so when it was closed and we were not able to access it, we worked very quickly with our partner Care Here, and so we did telehealth visits. And so what we weren't able to do was provide the prescriptions, but we still had all of the medical appointments, and then folks would go to Walgreens or King Soopers and had their prescriptions filled. The nice part is the majority of them were on the generic formulary. So it was a very minimal impact to our employees in terms of cost having to pay out of pocket for those prescriptions. But what we didn't see, which is great, is a huge dip in people filling their prescriptions or not going to their appointments. And that's really important in things like high blood pressure and other issues that a person could have for ongoing care to help keep them as healthy as possible. So it was still fully utilized and we had a great turnout for it.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I don't see any other questions. So let's go ahead and move on.
Okay.
Well, wait, I'll take that back. City Manager.
I'm sorry, Mayor. One of the things, I know Noelle said it, but for us to have a healthcare increase of only 4%, while the rest of the country typically is seeing maybe twice as much as that, I think we really do need to applaud ourselves for this. This is a strategy the city has pursued for years, long before my time. And I think that the council really needs to be congratulated. I mean, this is, in all my experience in every city I've ever been, I've never seen this before. So I think it's just outstanding on how we're able to manage this cost, because typically healthcare alone can eat up a city budget pretty quick. So I just couldn't go without saying that because I think it's just awesome.
Good job. Good job.
You know, if I can say one other thing, to, just to add to Mark's thankfulness to the council in approving a philosophy of market and the expression that we want to be an employer of choice. It's helped us to do a lot of things. You'll remember a few years back, our attrition was on track to be at over 20%, which is so costly. Over the last 2 years, we've averaged about 6% turnover, and that is a very, very, very healthy turnover for any organization, certainly government. And we are just retaining our employees. And I could share, if we had the time, anecdotal information about employee engagement and how much employees love working here, how they feel about being here, the contributions they're making because they feel valued. So we're really achieving our goal. And I really thank council for always supporting that. It's made a huge difference, I think, in our workforce in a lot of different ways.
Great. Thank you, Noelle.
Thank you.
Great. All righty. We can go ahead and move on.
Okay. I did kind of want to touch on a few of the insurance funds that we have here at the city. One in particular is the health insurance fund. I'm not sure if everyone remembers, but people are typically used to a fully insured health insurance product, and that's where you might be with Kaiser or Cigna or one of the other insurance providers, and you just pay a monthly premium, and they provide service, and you don't really worry about your costs or anything like that. So here in Littleton, it's a little different. We are what we call self-funded for health insurance, or partially self-funded, might be a better term. So any claims that actually occur based on a health claim, the city pays that. Now, we contract with Cigna for negotiated rates so that we can keep those costs down. But any procedure that happens or any doctor's visit, the city does pay for. What we do also have is an individual stop loss. So currently, I believe it's at $150,000. So any claims that are above $150,000, we do have a secondary insurance product that covers those costs. And then the one thing that we are adding this year is aggregate stop loss as well. That's something we haven't had in the past. And so that's going to be a new insurance product that we're adding to our lineup. So just to kind of clarify how health insurance works here at the city, as far as claims and premiums. And the other two insurance funds that we have are related to unemployment and a short and long-term disability. And so for unemployment, we talked about this related to COVID. We have seen such an increase this year, specifically in the second and third quarter of 2020. Unfortunately, we are going to be able to use CARES Act money for that, and also the state is funding a portion as well. They're going to be funding 50%, and CARES Act is going to be funding 50%. So if you look at that budget for 2020 estimates, you're going to see a fairly large dollar amount. We did estimate $208,000 for 2020, so you're going to see that there, but we have an offsetting revenue related to that as well. And then the other couple of insurances that we have is workers' comp. So again, we are self-funded for workers' comp claims. So a number of municipalities contract with the state or Pinnacle, and Pinnacle provides workers' comp coverage. Here in Littleton, we're self-funded. So again, any claim that comes through workers' comp, the city does fund that, but we also provide rates internally to each department to offset those costs. I will note that with the change of the fire department, we have seen a significant decrease in workers' comp claims. And I think that's just inherent in some of the injuries that might occur. So with us not having a fire department, we have realized some significant savings in the workers' comp plan right now. And then the last one that we have is the property and liability fund. And this just covers any liability claims, errors and omissions, things of that nature related to the city, and then also any property claims. And we do have deductibles for those. We contract with CIRSA. We have a $5,000 deductible for any property claim, and we have a $50,000 deductible for liability claims. One thing that's you're going to see different in the 2021 budget related to property and liability is based on the state law that recently changed related to police officers and liability. For police officers, we did increase our property and liability expenditures for 2021 by about $200,000. That's an estimate at this time. And we're hoping that we'll be able to maintain that amount. But if, that might come in a little bit higher, we're just not sure. But we did put in $200,000 related to that. So that's just a couple of our insurance funds. I think a couple of highlights related to HR is we do have another policy question, and this is related to the Omnibus program. So two of the programs that you're going to see in the 2021 budget that have some significant changes are the Omnibus and the shopping cart programs. These are two programs that the city has provided for a number of years, and you'll see the shopping cart program, we have opted to discontinue that program in 2021. And then for the Omnibus program, we do have a policy question with the budget proviso. And I think Ashley and Noel are on the line who might be able to talk specifically to those two programs, since we do have a policy question related to the Omnibus program.
Good evening, Council. Yeah, these are two programs, again, where COVID has really just wreaked havoc, especially with social distancing. And starting to look at the data and knowing with our shopping cart, and our mission really is to keep our seniors safer at home, we decided with the uncertainty of COVID and knowing that there are other programs out there that could help serve our seniors with grocery delivery and shopping for seniors, we opted to recommend discontinuing the shopping cart. Knowing that the medical health of our seniors is critical as well, we have decided to move forward with restarting the Omnibus in a limited capacity. Our focus will be prioritizing medical appointments. Again, due to the reduced capacity, given social distancing, we will have to operate a smaller number of trips than we've had before, invest in safety protocols following what RTD and others are doing. And we've proposed a proviso for you, knowing that we really would also like to take the time to truly look at hard data and do a better job at capturing more statistics and really having those drive the decisions that we make around this program. We also know that we aren't necessarily transportation experts at the City of Littleton, and there are folks out there that really could do this better than us, who use technology to really optimize the routes, who could help us adapt to supply and demand, changing conditions, even respond better to situations like COVID. So we would like to take the extra time to pursue some of those ideas and come back to you, hopefully with a more efficient, cost-effective way of operating these programs that could be a win-win for the City of Littleton in terms of delivering even better service levels to our citizens while helping us operate and maintain efficiencies even better.
Great. We do have one question at this time. Councilmember Fay.
Yeah, Ashley, you hit on something there by saying we aren't transportation experts. RTD, it seems, has several vehicles that give special drop-off services to people who need it, especially seniors and handicapped. What is our rationale for duplicating that service?
I think right now, Carol, and at least the preliminary investigations that Tiffany and Noel and I have done jointly now that this transportation has fallen within administrative services, is that we're seeing that right now, currently RTD and the counties that we're partnering, for example, with the Senior Resource Center, which stopped offering transportation services as of June 30th, don't necessarily cover all of the boundaries within the City of Littleton, and trying to work towards coming up with a best solution to still service those areas while also maintaining that quality of service that our citizens here in Littleton are used to. So I think for one example we have been talking with Arapahoe County in particular and understanding where they're trying to go with SRC basically dismantling their transportation services. And they've been talking with some outsourcing opportunities that we've also been talking with to see if we could basically expand those services as well. I think we want to understand more what those could really cost, and ultimately be able to respond again to supply and demand. And I think, as everybody has highlighted here, there still may need to be additional cuts that we make in 2021, depending on how COVID, I guess, impacts us and our sales tax revenues. And so this, I think, will give us some time to do some more of that additional research to come back to you with more data, more details of what things potentially could look like, and knowing with PBB and trying to truly understand what are the priorities of our programs. Leave it up to council to help us decide what are the programs that we need to carry forward.
Great.
So it sounds like you're going to bring us more information so we can make an educated decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are looking at the costs right now of what it has cost us to actually run this program, and knowing again that there are, for example, technology solutions out there that actually use software and the data input by citizens who are riders and can help us identify things like unique ridership. Are we basically offering these programs for the 10 same people who are riding constantly, or are we truly reaching a number of our citizens? So those are things that we have not tracked in the past that we're looking to track now, as well as, again, using technology to help us with some optimization that could help us, again, maybe do seasonal routes that, depending on our supply and demand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Elrod.
I'm just actually going to make a comment. Thank you, Carol, for asking and making the recommendations of some other services. I had some of the same ideas, so thank you for that. And I also just wanted to say I do support this being a budget proviso for exactly that purpose, so that you can come back to us and let us know what are some other ways we can serve this community better, probably, and less costly to the city. So thank you. I do support this.
Great, thank you. And the one question I have, Ashley, then is, I know the omnibus is used heavily. The numbers are quite high. So when you do come back to us, if you could, break it out for the shopping cart, as far as the numbers that we have for that.
Absolutely. And one idea too, Jerry, just to touch on that too, is that shopping cart really has been more of a fixed route service. Depending on how COVID manifests, we could look potentially at trying to combine the two into a single on-demand program and optimize that. So that's another just option of something that we're looking into as well.
Great. And I know a lot of folks will use that for the grocery services. So maybe I talking to the city manager, that there may be some other opportunities for nonprofits to provide that service, grocery service delivery. That'll be good.
And more grants, hopefully.
Yes. Councilmember Elrod.
Jerry, you prompted a question. Sorry. So the actual vehicle, where does the cost of the vehicle sit? And there must be a cost associated with that. I don't know that we're seeing it here, correct? Because that could be an efficiency as well. If at the end of the day, we find other services, we may not have to sustain these vehicles for this purpose, or they may be redeployed as like a tourist vehicle to get people around to, I don't know, parts of the city of Littleton. So.
Exactly. And those are the fixed costs, Karina, that we did, I believe, receive the actual initial purchase of those vehicles through a grant. But the maintenance and repairs are costs that are calculated into our numbers. And you're exactly right. It does, in terms of that fixed cost that we really can't change or get rid of, that's where looking at outsourcing this or partnering with somebody, it would give us more flexibility if we didn't have those costs and overhead to maintain.
Great, thank you. City Attorney.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to echo what Ms. Bolton said. We received the funding for the purchase of that from a CDOT grant. So, but yeah, it doesn't take into account the ongoing maintenance and depreciation.
Okay, all right, thank you. We have no more questions.
Okay, all right. I don't have any additional highlights or things to mention for human resources. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to information technology. And we don't have a policy question related to IT, but we do have a budget highlight. And this is kind of related. Well, I guess COVID kind of pushes us a little further into the realm of cybersecurity. And while we're using some of our CARES money to address some of our cybersecurity issues, there's going to be additional costs moving forward that is not going to be funded by the CARES Act. And so we did add $50,000 in the 2021 budget to address some of these cybersecurity issues. And we do have a program highlight related specifically to cybersecurity. And so I'll let Ashley kind of talk about that part of it.
Thanks, Tiffany. Yeah, so we talked, I think it was in round 3, where council had supported investing more in more software for advanced email threat phishing protection. While CARES Act is covering that first year for us, given it is a net new add to the city, we would like to continue adding that into our ongoing operating budget. And hence that's the $50,000 ask. On top of that, we did just want to highlight a rediversion, I guess, of existing funds that we have used to truly invest in cybersecurity awareness. We truly believe at the City of Littleton that our own people are our best defense against the cybersecurity attacks and threats. And the more education we can provide, the better off. And so as council, as you guys all know, we have shifted this year from doing an annual 2-hour training to trying to do more bite-sized monthly trainings that are 5 minutes and less. We're hoping you're finding the training entertaining and small enough chunks that it can be done even on a walk to the car over a phone. And we have been seeing higher and higher percentages in terms of our employees taking the training, as well as our click rate, as we call it, where we periodically do phishing tests where we will send out a test phish. And if folks actually click on it, they are caught phishing and are put in remedial training. And we have seen our click rate go down from 23% to 6%, which we do think is attributed to this heightened awareness and everybody taking their training.
Great. We do have a couple questions. Council member Elrod, then Faye.
Ashley, there's a function I think I think it's an Outlook function where it's like report phishing and like you can automatically report it. Is that is that something that you're doing in 2020 or in 2021?
Yes, Karina, that is actually a plugin that comes with our KnowBe4 security awareness training. And so we were able to actually configure that so that as long as we maintain our existing security awareness provider, that will continue to work and will continue to automatically create a help desk ticket for my team to actually do the research to confirm, is that really a suspected phish? Is it really legitimate? Or in some cases, it may actually be one of our tests, in which case, when you press on it, you'll get a congratulations email that you spotted one of our phish.
So are you saying that's already deployed and maybe I'm not seeing it on my iPad?
It is, and it depends on how you're actually accessing Outlook. So I will for sure follow up with you after this and making sure that that's there, because it should be. The plugin may not be set up, or depending if you're accessing through O365 on the web or a local install, it's in a different place.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Faye.
I would just say, Ashley, that I love those little training segments. I've learned to look forward to them. I love the characters, and I can't wait for the next one. This is true.
They are rather cheeky.
And they're all, is that from England? Where is that from?
Yes, that particular series. Yes, they're all British actors. Kind of a riff on the original Office.
What's that again, Carol?
That one guy reminds me of you. I won't say which one.
Thanks. All right, cool. We have no more questions. So let's move on.
All right. So a couple of changes, and Ashley can probably speak better to these than I can, but we had a number of changes to our software maintenance line items in information technology and also our hardware maintenance. So Ashley, do you want to kind of touch on some of those for council?
Sure. We tried as best we could to offset with reducing other line items, but we did add some new software solutions into our repository for 2020. Jennifer mentioned Bluebeam, which is allowing us to do electronic plan reviews. We added a software called Backupify, which actually backs up our O365 environment as a precaution. And in the event Microsoft ever got hacked or something catastrophic happened, that we would still hold on to all of our email and files throughout O365. We also invested in 3D GIS product called Arc Urban, which is allowing us now to do models in 3D, which I think really does add some perspective in terms of envisioning how the city of Littleton could look. And additionally, on the hardware side, we have added additional Wi-Fi equipment to help with our internet around the city, as well as we had some maintenance items come due that weren't originally, I guess, identified in IT's long-term budget, and me still being relatively new to the city, weren't aware that they were coming. And so those were really around some network switches and our firewalls that help us protect our network that are coming due, which contributed again to those hardware increases.
Council Member Elrod.
I think I have a question for Mark. This might apply to Mark, but it's related to IT.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So Mark, I haven't seen anywhere here a relook at our City of Littleton website, but more important, not just the website, all of the different websites that we have. There's significant efficiency to be gained by really evaluating all of those, maintaining all of those. So has anyone maybe talked, ponder, or I kind of see Ashley smiling. So there's opportunity there.
Well, amen to the opportunity. I think we've had a lot of conversation about this internally, and it may, Ashley, I don't know if you have a comment here. I may turn this over to you, but we are very interested in trying to pursue some kind of integrated update to our web pages.
Yeah, Karina, we definitely, this is on our radar, and knowing that we've had such success with our intranet, I don't know if council has actually had an opportunity to really get on to what we call the hub, but we built this on using O365 SharePoint. And again, we did this prior to COVID, not knowing that COVID would happen, but I truly feel like we would have been lost without this. It has given us such a way to communicate seamlessly, easily, with the click of a button through multiple channels for our employees. And we would like to see if we can replicate this again with our external website. I've been talking with Kelly Nardi in terms of looking at bringing up our RFP again. We weren't going to get into CARES Act, I think, yet, but this was one of the items that Mark had asked us to speak about in the event that if we have, I believe $700,000 left, that if there is an opportunity to extend that date past December 30th, we were going to come back to you with an ask to try to invest that into the website. Right now, I think the December 30th constraint in terms of having to have everything implemented is holding us back. But if it does turn out that we are able to see an extension in that date, that was what we were going to come back and ask for your permission to try to improve.
Yeah, I might add, I know Kelly Nardi, she's been talking to me for quite honestly the last few years, wanting to take a look at our web pages. Yeah, I think, I can't remember exactly how we represent this in the city budget, but clearly in my mind, this is one that if we do have an opportunity for a supplemental appropriation, this is high on the staff's list where we may come back to council and ask that we look into this a little bit more deeply. I think just the whole COVID experience here has kind of taught us that, you know, the reliance here, not just by staff, but by our community on our web page, it's time that we try to address this more efficiently. I know Kelly certainly can talk about this.
Great.
Everybody. Yeah, Kathy Weaver and I have been wanting to do this for about 2 years now. This was I think a policy question in last year's budget, or maybe it didn't make it past the budget team, but you know, we have looked at some vendors. We call littletongov.org the mothership. With our current vendor, we are allowed a graphic refresh of the site this year. And so we're actually meeting with our website vendor next week. But to Ashley's point, you know, we are looking at a grant through SIPA to see if we can fund it with one of those grants combined with some funding possibly in my budget that does not get expended this year. So the bottom line, Karina, is it's on our radar. It's a matter of funding, and we're going to take a look at how we might be able to fund it.
Great. I see no more questions.
Okay. All right. I think the last section is finance, and then we'll talk about purchasing and procurement and contracts. But as far as finance, we don't have any policy questions this year. We don't have any budget highlights. I think you'll see some reductions in our line items. We did reduce professional consulting by about $15,000. Historically, we've had some funds in there to provide some efficiencies throughout the city through a program that we had called Peak Process Improvements. And we just realized with the constraints of budget that we needed to go ahead and reduce professional consulting for that amount. And then also you're going to see a reduction in bank fees. We had intended on moving forward with utilizing our bank to process our sales tax returns. So currently the bank processes our zero returns. So anytime a company sends a zero return to the bank is processing that for us. So it eliminates our staff internally to do that. We'd envisioned moving forward with having the bank process all of our returns, but due to COVID and other limitations, we just haven't gotten there. So we've kind of delayed that. So you'll see a decrease related to fees for that program. And then we also reduced some of our software maintenance for a subscription that we've had in the past for Municipal Facts. And this was an organization that was developing some databases for municipalities throughout Colorado so that we could have one place to go to kind of compare our sales tax revenues based on certain criteria, geographic locations, to just kind of give us an idea of how we compare to other jurisdictions. And they've just been struggling to get that up and going. So in light of COVID and budget reductions, we removed that as well. So that's really all we have in finance. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions for finance.
Not yet.
All right. Well, I'm going to move towards purchasing. And Ashley, I know you're here, so I'm hoping you can kind of tag team me on this one. But one of the exciting things that we're doing in 2020 is we're creating a separate division called Procurement and Contracts. And what we're going to do is we've actually reallocated some internal positions, some internal FTEs. Although there's going to be an increase in cost for this division moving forward, I think you're absolutely going to see some savings realized by us centralizing some of our purchasing and contracting efforts throughout the city. And so we're going to have 2 FTEs, and we're working on those right now in 2020. We're going to have a division director, and we're also going to have a purchasing agent. And these 2 positions are going to work closely with all the departments throughout the city and trying to centralize some of our purchasing efforts, making sure that we're not duplicating efforts. They're going to be able to renegotiate pricing. They're going to be able to work with vendors directly. They're going to be able to be strategic with all the departments and forecasting and understanding the full process of when we need to get involved on the onset of a large purchase, or even if it's a small purchase, but really working collaboratively with all the departments so that we can really realize and utilize some of the saving efforts that we've seen already today. We've been doing that internally, and I believe we've already seen over $350,000 in savings citywide just doing some of these efforts internally. So if we're going to move forward, we want to formalize this new division and take advantage of that. And Ashley, you can certainly add to that.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job, Tiffany. I think, Council, if you remember last year, you had allocated a $60,000 one-time expense so that we could focus on IT procurement. And what we essentially did with that was bring on a temp employee who really did focus on technology areas that we could negotiate. And that contributed really to that $300,000 in cost avoidance and savings. And so we're looking now to centralize more functions in addition to technology procurement, as well as really help streamline, I think, the contracts process and see what we can do to also help Reed and our city attorney's office with being more streamlined and recognizing that they're a lean department who has better things to do as well. See what we can do to help them with taking care of things more upfront with standardization and relooking at some of our policies to try to update them with the times.
Mark?
Yeah.
So if I may, Mayor and Council, I know I have talked to many of you over time about probably, in my view, one of the greatest inefficiencies of this organization when we decided many years ago, and probably for good reason at the time, to decentralize purchasing and basically left it up to every department to try to manage that the best they could. And we had finance still obviously overseeing a lot of that, but it led to great inefficiencies. And I think that we found a very talented individual who now has stepped in and truly has saved us $300,000 in cost and cost avoidance here by just centralizing this and to negotiate these purchases and contracts. This is, in my opinion, is just long overdue. And we took this as an opportunity through the early retirement program and other existing positions to just reorganize. And so we probably would have done this without COVID, but I think now was the perfect time for us to try to reorganize and step into this more of a centralized purchasing approach. And I know, and again, many of those discussions I've had with you, I've shared my past experiences in other organizations when you do centralize that. And it really does lead to much more of an efficient and effective organization. And quite honestly, I'm pretty excited about having Dave Ems is his name, and maybe some of you have met him, but he is a pretty talented guy and has really done us great service here in just the short period of time he's been here.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And I notice it doesn't affect the salaries at all.
Well, it doesn't, there is an increase in salaries just based on the reclassifications that we've made. But it's not going to increase the number of FTEs because we were able to reallocate some vacant positions into those two positions. But there is an increase because we did change the titles and the level that the participant or the employees are going to be at.
Is that in the financial section?
There's a budget, there's a highlight, and I believe the net change is about $95,000.
What page is that on? Maybe I'm on the wrong page.
We're not showing the salary differences by department.
Right, yeah, and so if you're looking at the line items, you're not gonna see that change in salary because the way that we had to do the budget this year, because there were so many changes, any salary adjustments that were made, any FTE changes or increases are kind of lumped together in that one line item under general operations that's called personnel. And when we get to the final budget, you will see that in each department. But unfortunately, just based on the timing of COVID and getting the document prepared and changes that we were making, we weren't able to do that by line item. But you will see an increase in this particular one.
So is that change is going to be made in the second quarter?
It'll be made when the final document is produced. Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. Thank you. There are no other questions.
All right. So I think we'll go ahead and move along to communications, and we have Kelly on there who can help go through this one. But again, we don't have any policy questions related to communications. We don't have any budget highlights, but a couple of things that I just wanted to touch on is in 2020, there was a plan to create a strategic communications plan. And that was one of the things that we did reduce from the 2020 budget. And so you're going to see a decrease in 2021 of about $10,000 in professional consulting. And then also printing and binding, you're going to see a pretty large reduction there. We centralize all of our costs related to printing and binding at the city, and it's in Kelly's division. And you're going to see a pretty substantial reduction. I believe it's about $60,000 or so related to printing and binding. And so that's just reducing, some of the production that we're going to be able to do next year, where it's going to be limited. some essential cost savings. And then also a reduction that you're going to see is the Littleton calendar. So I believe the number of print versions that we're doing, we're reducing in 2021. So you're going to see a decrease in that line item. So Kelly, you want to highlight any of those?
No, I think you covered it fairly well. The actual cut to the print shop budget is going to be around $45,000. Some of that reduction is reallocating costs for the main Canon printer that is in the print shop, and then our Konica printer that we share with community development or with economic development. And yeah, the calendar will be reducing the number of copies we print from 15,000 down to 7,500. We think that this reduction in the print shop budget should probably be okay. This year, that budget's going to come in very, very low because so much of what that print shop does is based on things like our events or summer reading program and things like that didn't happen this year. So next year we'll just kind of play it by ear and try to figure out what, kind of that new normal cost will be.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep. Does anyone have any questions for Kelly and her group?
I do. First, I want to thank Kelly and Mark for all the communication changes that you have made over the last year or two or three. I think you've done a great job, Kelly. Thank you very much. You're kind of in a position like a Monday morning quarterback, where after it's all done, the football game's over on Monday. That's when people decide they want to start criticizing. I think there's been just a very few people that have been criticizing you and maybe getting more airtime than necessary. But Kelly, I think you and your whole staff have done an amazing job during this critical time that we've been going through. So thank you very much.
I appreciate that, Jerry. And I do want to give a shout out to my staff. I think, being able to sort of take Weekends on Main from a concept to a proposal to the health department in such a short period of time and then being able to execute that was, that was really a big deal. And I want to give kudos to Elizabeth for spending 7 weekends working that event throughout the summer. Tyler too, what Tyler has done allowing us to be able to do our meetings like this, not just city council, but all the other boards and commissions. I think Tyler trained more than 100 people. And I think for the most part, being able to do our meetings virtually and remotely has gone off almost without a hitch. And then Littleton Report Online, the rest of our staff, Kathy Weaver, Shira Pullman, we've been publishing that weekly. And in some weeks, we published several editions a week when we had so much information that we really needed to get out. So I think, supplementing the print issue of the Littleton Report with the electronic version of the Littleton Report Online has been really successful. We get reports and I'm able to take a look at how many people opened it, how many received it, what were the most popular stories people looked at. So we're trying to adapt as we go to try to give people the kind of information that appears to be the most interesting to them. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Great. All right. Council, any other questions? We don't have any other questions.
Okay. All right. Well, we are definitely ahead of schedule. And Mark, I'll leave that up to you if we want to go ahead and move forward with a couple of other departments, or if we want to go ahead and call it quits for today.
I think my suggestion, Mayor and Council, is that we just call it an evening. We are missing one council member, and he'll be back tomorrow, Councilmember Driscoll. So I just probably, and I'm sure he would appreciate the opportunity to kind of hear most of the conversation. So for tomorrow, we do have the city clerk, court, police, public works, library, museum. So there is a fair amount to cover there. We also have the capital projects fund, which I know is going to take some real discussion here. But I think I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to accomplish all of that tomorrow evening. Again, it's a 3-hour meeting, so be prepared for that. I hope that's fair.
I think that's a good suggestion. I think this was a good first night, that's for sure. We moved right along. So thank you, everybody, for doing that. Mark, did you have any other report you want to make on anything?
No, I think I appreciate the conversation here. I realize a virtual meeting like this for a budget is a little bit more awkward. And so I appreciate council's patience and quite honestly, your engagement. I think we've identified a few issues here that we're going to take to a parking lot, a few follow-up questions. So I just want to thank you for your time and engagement.
Let's go over the parking lot items if we made. The one item that I had was the local partnership funding.
Correct. I think the travel and training for the city council, I think we just, my recommendation is we just leave it in the budget as is. We'll just monitor that in 2021. And if COVID releases travel and training a little bit more flexibility, then we'll just add more to council. And I think we can manage that in a supplemental. Bid and DDA did come up. We're going to talk about that and the incentives for that in the third night. Budget proviso for the ballot measure. That was an oversight on my part. Clearly, that was the intent, is to make sure we have that for council. Neighborhood grants, we're going to go ahead and put that into the parking lot as well. A couple of thoughts from council about how you may want to perhaps eliminate that or combine that. But we'll talk more about that in detail on the third night. And the internet website. I think staff's been pursuing that, and we're hoping that a grant alternative may provide some flexibility. But if it doesn't, and perhaps the CARES Act doesn't provide the flexibility and timing, then it is our recommendation that we add that to a possible supplemental appropriation, second quarter of next year. So that's kind of my summary and recap.
Great. Thank you, Council. Was that sound good? Anything that was missing there as far as the parking lot? I think you got it. Did a good job there, Mark.
Okay.
City Attorney, did you have any report?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, if that's the case, we're all through. It is 8:26 and we are adjourned until tomorrow, 6:00 p.m.
Okay.
Have a good night. Thank you.